Okay, should we make a start? Right. Okay, so good afternoon and welcome. This is the first of 3 lunchtime webinars on the CIWEM Chartership hosted by the West Midlands branch. My name is Stefan Fiedelschuster and I will be facilitating these sessions over the coming weeks. I'm a non-chartered CIWEM member and I'm the co-chair of the West Midlands New Members Group. The goal of the New Members Group is to help young professionals across sectors to get chartered with CIWEM. So if anyone listening is new to the process or interested in starting it, we're here to help. Please do stick around to the end or contact me if you've got any questions about the New Members Group specifically. Joining me today on the panel are Alistair Mosley, the former president and honorary vice president of CIWEM and reviewer of 20 years. He also provides strategic business support to companies in the water sector, advising on regulation and long-term business planning. Next, we have Hannah Coogan, Technical Director at JBA Consulting, specializing in flood risk management. Hannah has previously won the CIWEM Young Members Award and is the current chair of the West Midlands branch and deputy chair of, let me get this right, the CIWEM Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Expert Panel. She has been involved in CIWEM work for nearly 20 years. And then finally, we have Mufassal Syed, who is a senior modeler at Severn Trent Water and chartered member of CIWEM. He's also chartered engineer, environmentalist, and scientist with over 15 years of experience in flood risk and flood risk management and as a water quality specialist. He also holds a PhD in hydroinformatics, having researched applications for AI for water quality management. So for today's session, we will start with a short presentation from Alistair about the basics of CIWEM Chartership to ease into the subject. Following that, we will start with a few questions directly from me to the panel, after which we'll open up to your questions. I'll be monitoring the questions throughout, so please do feel free to just submit them as and when they arise, and we'll answer them during the Q&A section towards the end of the call. We have an amazing amount of experience here today, so I can only recommend you make the most of it and ask away. There are no wrong questions. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Alistair to start us off with the presentation.
Thanks, Stefan. I'll just share my slide. There we go. There we go. Okay, welcome everybody. Really pleased we've got a good turnout today and some real interest in joining CIWEM. I'm going to give a short presentation now just on sort of the basics of becoming chartered, which is, as you can see, is a helping hand to Chartership. We had actually thought about calling it lifting the lid on Chartership, but we went with helping hand in the end. So what I'm going to cover in my short talk, I'm going to talk about the 5 competency areas and what they mean, so that you understand them. So essentially there's 14 CIWEM competencies grouped into 5. I'm also then going to have a look at the chartered engineer and the chartered environmentalist ones as well, because those are the most common that people apply for at the same time as applying for C.WEM. I'm not going to cover CSci today because that tends to be not that common, but if there is anybody interested on the call today, as Stefan said, get in touch with him and I can help you with that. I have a slide pack that I can share with you for CSci. Once I've talked you through those competency areas, I'm going to look at the career overview reports. And people often don't realise what this is about, but I'm going to talk to you about the purpose of it, why we need it, and some suggested formats. And hopefully at the end of that talk, that'll be the basis of you thinking about your application and also ahead of the talks that we've got coming up next week and the following Wednesday. So the first thing just to explain to you is that the Chartership qualification is a gold standard. Any professional in any walk of life should be thinking about becoming chartered in that walk of life. And there are many, many charterships. The ones we're familiar with, of course, are chartered water environmental manager, chartered engineer, chartered environmentalist. Of course, you've heard of chartered accountants, chartered person development managers, chartered marketeers. So the chartership is a gold standard. And very often the chartership is owned, if you like, by an organisation that's just does that purpose. So the Engineering Council owns the chartered engineer. Science Council owns chartered scientist. Society of the Environment owns chartered environmentalist. And they essentially grant that chartership under license to the bodies. So all these organisations you see offering those registrations, including, may I say, the Institute of Civil Engineers and Mechanical Engineers, have to do that under licence. But we are different. CIWEM has its own Royal Charter. We are the owners of the Chartered Water and Environmental Manager qualification, for which we're very proud. And you can only get that through us, certainly at the moment. And being chartered is being chartered. So if your organisation needs you to be chartered, then C.WEM is fine. People often get hung up about the fact that they want all these other registrations. You only need those registrations if you really need them for your job. But to be chartered and to achieve that professional standard, C.WEM is all that you really need. So let's just look at the chartership competencies as they relate to CIWEM. So as I said, there are 14 competencies and they're grouped into 5 areas. And they're done for a particular reason. Those 5 areas are seeking out particular aspects of your personal development. It's assuring us that you are a well-qualified and well-rounded professional. So the first group are what we call the A competencies, and we title those existing and emerging factors influencing environmental and water affairs. And people don't really often understand this, but basically if you're doing a job, you should know why you're doing it. It isn't enough just to be executing your role. You should know what are the wider things that are affecting your work, and no more so than does that happen in water and environmental management. There are so many things that affect what we do, from climate change through to European legislation, through to population growth, all sorts of things. And these are things you need to be aware of when you're doing your work. So all we're testing you in the A competencies is to make sure that you are well-rounded and that you understand the environment in its broadest context that you operate in. They're not necessarily about doing projects, they're about what you know, what you understand. And that's what we're testing you for. Now, the B competencies are all about doing your job. They are the day job. There are 4 of these, and they're split quite neatly into being able to analyse a problem so that you treat the cause and not the symptom. How you then develop options and present them to whoever's investing in it or stakeholders that might be interested in it. How you manage and deal with change, really, really difficult. You know, nothing carries on without change. And as a professional, you need to show that you can deal with that without being completely thrown sideways in the project going down the pan. And the final one is making sure that when you've built it, it works. So it's actually, or created it, looking back over what it is you've created or managed or whatever to see whether it's been effective. So that's the B competencies. Should be the easiest for most of us to do, to be honest, because that's what we know and are familiar with. The C competencies are about working safely, effectively and sustainably. More importantly, I should have that in this slide. There are 4 competencies here. So the first one of those tests whether you're capable to operate and run managed resources. That can include people, equipment, processes, all sorts of things. So it's just showing that you have got the experience to be able to take on responsibility. The second competence is about health and safety, absolutely vital in all that we do. And you can imagine that's quite a rigorous competence. Third one is about sustainability. Amazing how many people don't really understand or appreciate what sustainability really means. And certainly if you're interested in doing chartered environmentalist, then you really do need to get C3 right, I can tell you, because the chartered environmentalist standards are all very much rooted in sustainability. And the final one of the C competencies is quality, making sure that you deliver your work in a quality and effective way. The D competencies are about your ability to communicate as a professional and your professional ethics. So there's 2 of these, and although the first one talks about communicating in English, that is there because it is an English Royal Charter, but what we're really testing you for in the D competencies is whether you're able to communicate at all levels, knowing the difference between presenting to a board director and presenting to a layman. And most of us have to do both at some time in our time and everything in between. The ability to chair meetings, ability to hold communication and give clear direction. And professional ethics, as a fundamental, you must be able to know about the CIWEM's code of conduct, which are very good and are very well matched with other codes of conduct in all walks of life. And the final competencies are about you as a professional and your commitment to developing not only yourself, but developing those around you as well. So those are the 5 C.WEM mandatory competencies. They neatly encompass most professional walks of life in our industry, and we're very proud of those. They've taken a long time to get to the stage they're at now, and we are pretty confident that they're producing some really good professionals, those that adhere to those competencies. And any of you that might join me on some of the fast track to Chartership courses will know that I also encourage you to do your CPD around these 5 competence areas, because it actually makes for well-rounded CPD. So I'm just going to quickly dip into the CEng competencies, followed by the CEnv ones. So although they're still grouped in 5 areas, the competencies are different in many ways. And so when you are deciding you want to apply for chartered engineer, you really do have to think hard about how you want to approach answering these. And it is not just a question of reading and copying across. So the A competencies are showing your understanding and commitment to engineering knowledge and emerging technology. The B competencies are applying appropriate theoretical and practical methods to engineering problems. So we'd expect your B competencies to be really well rooted in engineering techniques and processes. The C competencies are about your understanding of technical processes and your ability to lead using those processes, as well as commercial leadership. So very well matched again to the CIWEM ones, about being able to do your job effectively. And the D competencies are very much around effective and interpersonal skills, again, being able to communicate. And finally, the E competencies, of which there are more, incidentally, than the CIWEM ones, demonstrate personal commitment to professional standards and working ethically. Now, you'll notice here, if you total up all those numbers, there are actually 17 CEng competencies. So when you're doing your application, you'll drop down your CEWEM competencies and you'll complete those, and then you'll drop down the CEng ones, and then you'll find that you've got slightly more to answer. But they are actually quite well matched. Now, I'm not going to read through all these. I'm pretty confident that you're all going to be allowed to see these slides, and this is a really useful cross-check for you to help you. It doesn't mean you can copy, cut and paste them across, but it means you can use the CIWEM answers as your basis, and then you can adapt them for the CEng answer and save some time. One of the principles about today and the next few weeks is it is important that you do your C.WEM competencies first. It's very, very important. You're applying for C.WEM. You can't pass CEng and fail CEWEM. If you fail CEWEM, you fail everything. So get your CEWEM competencies right, get them happy with you and your sponsor, and then take those across to the CEng ones and adapt them. But at least that's a more efficient way of doing it. And equally, you can do the same with your CEnv ones. So I'm just going to very, very quickly rattle through the CEM qualification competencies. Now, there's only 5 groups. There's only 4 groups this time. So the A competencies are about applying your knowledge and understanding of the environment, and again, very directed at sustainability. So very subtly different to the CIWEM ones, and there are 3 A competencies this time. Again, the B competencies, although they're about your job, day job, it's about understanding the sustainable management of the environment in the context of delivering your day job. C competencies, as for CEng and CEWEM, about communication and interpersonal skills. And then the D competencies, rather like the CIWEM E competencies, are about commitment to professional standards. And once again, here we see there is a cross match between the competencies. Start with CEWEM, adapt for CEnv, but remember that the core thing that society and the environment are looking for are people who really do understand all the principles of sustainability and how they apply them, not only in their home life, but in their day-to-day advice. Now, just for the last few minutes, I'm going to quickly go through the career overview. So there's going to be plenty of chance to ask questions about all this as we go back, and I'm sure I'll be able to dot back and forth through the slides if we need to. So just ask Stefan some questions, and I'll get the slides up as the panel answers your questions. So the career overview report is a really important document. You only have 1,000 words. The reason for that is because we don't have time to read a lot more. When the application is put out, it's put out to a panel of assessors, 3 assessors, who then have to very, very quickly read through your application and come to a view. And the career overview report is critical in helping them do that. If they simply see your CV and then the mandatory competencies, it's sometimes really, really difficult to read across from where you got the experience and then how you're applying it to the competencies. So the career overview report is a really important bridge to that. We don't assess it, but it's an important document. So please give it plenty of thought. I'm going to give you some ideas on how you can present that in a few seconds. It has to be written in first person. The one thing about Chartership is it's all about you. We don't want to know about what your company did. We don't want to know what your society is doing. We want to know what you do as a person. So try and avoid falling into the trap of starting to describe what the business is doing. We want to know about you. It's your opportunity to brag about what you do, if you like. And it's kind of counterintuitive to British people. We don't like being over-facing about what we do. But it's really important that this time you really tell us about you and be proud of what you've done. There is no prescribed format, but it is 1,000 words, so you have to stick to that. Some of the things we really need to see in your career overview report, again, if you like, it's the first thing we see about you, so we want to try and get to know you a little bit better in a very short space of time. So give an order of scale to the projects that you're working on. Don't just name them. Tell us a bit about them. How many people did they benefit? How many miles of pipe did you create? How many lakes did you clean? So it's all about scale of projects, the pieces of work, and most importantly, the responsibility that you held, because Chartership is about being able to work independently and to be accountable for what you do on behalf of you and your client. And then show how you've gained the experience and responsibility throughout your career. So there's obviously some elements of being chronological about what you tell us here, so we can see how you've gained your experience. So this is an invaluable aid to helping the assessors understand you and in your career. So when they read your mandatory competencies, they will give you a much better hearing and have a better understanding about you as an individual. It is essentially the executive summary to your CV, if you like. I'm just going to skip over these because we're running out of time, but these are the things that you should also see in your CV. We do need to know where you're working, where you've worked, the type of work that you've done. Something really good to get in is if you can get the key learning points in your career across. That's quite important. And also your aspirations for once you're chartered. So in terms of format, this is the last slide, Stefan, in case you're worried. The format, as I said, is not prescribed, but there are better ways of doing. There are ways of doing this that are better than others, and these are the kind of the 3 that we see the most and like the most. I'm saving the one I personally prefer to the end. So the first one, you can present your experience in chronological order. Start with your university education. Please do in your career report actually say where that was, by the way. Don't just say I got my degree and then moved on. We'd like to know where you studied. And then take us through the career changes to where you are today, and then finish with your current role. Another way of doing it is to present your experience in reverse order. So say what I'm doing now, and then work back step by step through your career to the point when you graduated. The one I like the best, though, actually, is those that open with a brief statement on a current role that you're doing, and then walk us through your career from your education, concluding with a reflection and the hopes for the future once chartered. That's a really nice way of guiding us through. It tells us where you are now very briefly, tells us why you wanted to study, how it takes you through your career step by step. And those steps, by the way, I haven't said this yet, should be the key milestones in your life that you can still recall as being important. Now, even at my great age of 60, I still know all the key things in my career that were turning points. That's what we should see in your career review, not absolutely everything you did. Just bring out the things that you think are the most significant to you in your development. And probably have 3 or 4 in there that we're then going to see in the mandatory competencies, so that we can, when something's mentioned in the competencies, we can refer back to the career overview report, and then if we want a bit more detail, we can track it back to the CV. So it's all about a thread. There should be a golden thread running through here, which should actually end at the PRI stage with something you're presenting that, again, we recognise. So keep that in mind. So the final thing, I've just shot my bolt here. Let me experience the examples that you can recall as turning points, okay? And I've actually said no more than 3. If you use more than 3, actually can be quite confusing, but anywhere between 3 and 5 is probably okay. But 3 has always been a golden number in life. So 3 is the one I would focus on. So that's the presentation. Stefan, I'm going to hand back now to you to put the panel through our paces on the questions that have been put forward. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Thank you, Alistair. That was a really, really good overview. So yeah, as I say, I'll run through some questions with the panel directly. But to anybody listening, please do use the Q&A feature at the bottom and submit any questions that you might have. Even if it strikes you as simple, you know, it might be something that hasn't occurred to other people pursuing chartership, or you know, it might help them as well. So please do submit questions as we go along. So my first question to the panel then, what is your recommendation to someone who hasn't yet made a start on the competencies at all? Where do you start, Alistair?
Well, I would start with where I've just finished. I would most definitely have a go at writing your career overview report, because it's a perfect way. It gives you a chance to reread your CV for a start off, because very often we've created these things and may have even forgotten what we've got in it, or actually find there are things that should be in it that we're missing. And if you actually sit down and tell the story, which is what the career overview report is, it's telling the story of your career today. That's a great way to start to really sort of make contact with your professional development.
Yeah. Do either of you want to add to that?
But I would add, like, it's all about a compelling storytelling. Somehow you need to make the reader interested. So this is your first port of call. But I beg to differ with Alistair in that I'm sure everyone have their own take on it. The way I would do it, probably whichever I find easy. So be it like, I know I have to do these things, career report, then competencies, then your CV, and then PRI. So whichever is easy. So I would pick probably competencies B, technical day in day out, I'm doing this. So either way, it's basically you need to look, the best thing to start is to start. Don't leave it. Just scribble something and get the ball rolling.
Absolutely.
Trust me, that get rid of that mental block. And you see.
Hannah?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to cut Mo off. And yeah, I'd follow what Mo has said. And I certainly, when I did mine, it's about 12 years ago now, but you know, I was quite, if I'm honest, I was quite scared of them. I thought, where do I start? And the way I did it was book an afternoon off work, sit in my back garden and force myself to do it. Get rid of any distractions and break it down into easy pieces. So the way I started mine, and the guidance has changed since 2008, but I went through the competencies and just put some thoughts against each one. And I thought I can write it into prose later. Just some bullet points is a really useful starting place. Or I could use this, or I could use that. And one thing I would say to people and people that I've mentored through it is that's the first step I always tell them to do. And then I say as a mentor, let's have a conversation. And I start that conversation by doing something akin to what Alistair's talked about that will go in the career overview. Because what I'm listening for as a mentor in that conversation is somebody to give me examples of things that they've done that they hadn't necessarily thought about using in their competencies. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, the first step I would say is, the way I would approach it anyway, is to start to put your thoughts down, give yourself some dedicated time with no distractions, and find a mentor to support you as soon as you start, really. And if you're struggling to find a mentor, then you can come to the local branch and we will support you on the branch to find a mentor.
Thank you, Hannah. I see we've got some questions coming in already. That's great. We'll come back around to those later, so thank you for that. Alistair, I guess you've got the most experience with the process as having been an assessor for quite some time. Are there any competencies that you see applicants struggle with in particular?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. The most common one that people struggle with is A1, because they don't read the question properly and they jump straight into talking about their day job and the things that affect their day job. Now, actually, that is relevant. So if you're officially an environment agency catchment officer, then clearly you need to know about sort of wider environment agency policies about catchment management, working with farmers and things. But actually, we want to know that you understand some of the carbon impacts of farming, perhaps. That might be an interesting one. Or what's the impact of us leaving Europe? What legislation is going to be happening? They're all things that will ultimately affect your job. So it's about thinking a little bit wider than the job you're doing and being showing that you're aware of the environmental challenges that are out there. So A1 is a classic. Another one that people often fall down on actually is C3, sustainability, because they're not able to properly articulate what sustainability is. It's just about keeping the balance of environment, economy, and society. So if you just bear that in mind, nearly all decisions that are made are either based with a financial slant on them, or a benefit to the company, economy if you like, or the benefit to the people. And it's all too easy to be swayed and have it going one way and not the other. You've got to have them in balance. So that's what we're really testing in C3. Another one that kind of does fox people occasionally, ironically, is B3, the change one. That's quite odd, because people probably don't realise they've experienced a change in managing a project. They probably just take it for granted. But by and large, every day in a project, something will happen that will mean there could be an impact on the date you're going to deliver it by, or how much it's going to cost. Yeah, so it's very, very simple. If you just step back and think about, well, what did change and what did I have to do? So if you have to write a reminder to the client that an extra piece of work is required, that's immediately a change. So that's doing it. And I guess the final one, if I had to mention anything, would be probably B4. And that's partly because a lot of people don't always have the opportunity to see a project through to its end, to see how it's being delivered. So really, if you are a professional and you're seeking experience, B4 is a competence that you might just have to go and get some permission to go and have an overview of something that's being built so that you can form your own opinion.
Thank you. That's a really comprehensive answer. On the back of that, I guess a related question, and this is for any members of the panel. So certain competencies seem to lend themselves to more technical roles, for example, the B competencies, and others more generalist or management roles, like perhaps the A competencies, you could argue. So do you think it's necessary to have worked in both in order to tick the boxes, if you will, for chartership?
I can go first if you like, Stefan. I would say from my own experience, at the time I applied, I was about 5 years into my career, and I've specialised really in sort of strategic flood management rather than being a technical flood modeller or hydrologist, although I have some experience in doing that. And I was told by somebody at the time I was applying, I couldn't apply because I wasn't technical enough, which really shook my confidence, actually. Ironically, I don't think that person was chartered. And I spoke to somebody else, and I think it's about finding allies here. I spoke to somebody else who said, actually, I completely disagree with that person, and it's about finding a well-rounded person that can do some of the technical stuff, yes, but it's not all about technical stuff. It's about that wider strategic thinking, environmental understanding, and understanding where what you do fits within the bigger picture. And I would say, I know we've got a specific session on the A and B competencies coming up, but make sure you take the time to engage. I would say this as the branch chair, but they come along virtually for now, and engage in our West Midlands events. Push yourself out of your comfort zone. Come and hear about things that aren't, if you're a flood management person, that aren't flood management. You know, if you work in other parts of the industry, then come along and find about air quality. For example, we did a fantastic event last year with Sustainability West Midlands on air quality, and I learned so much. Yeah, and learning is a lifelong process. So take those opportunities that CIWEM presents to help you become that well-rounded individual, to help you reach outside of your technical specialism.
Thank you. Alistair, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. Completely support everything Hannah said there, spot on. The CIWEM qualification is not actually about being technical. It's exactly as Hannah just said. It's all about being broad. It's a watered environmental management qualification. That's why it's so good, actually, because most of us in our day jobs, probably 10-15% technical. Most of it is about managing issues, bringing them together. I mean, yes, you probably do need to have seen and be aware of some technical things in your career, but actually, if your career is about being a manager, bringing people together, you don't even have to put projects forward for the B competencies. They can be management roles that you carry. We find this a lot with the Environment Agency. A lot of the people there have got some big responsibilities in terms of catchment management and people. And most of their issues are about dealing with stakeholders, polluters, but obviously having to understand the kind of issues having to face, but we're testing them as managers. So technical is not it. I would say that if you want to go for chartered engineer, you've got to probably show more technical evidence of what you do, actually, particularly in B2. It's the engineering one. B2 is the one that trips most people up because it's got quite a nasty sting in the tail for being a technical. And that's where being a manager probably isn't enough. You've got to be able to demonstrate some technical knowledge. But certainly CEng, we're testing your overall ability as a manager, first and foremost.
Yeah. Any points on that from you, Mo?
What I understand is when we look at technical, because I am from a technical background, I have suffered from this problem quite a lot. That how do I demonstrate my health and safety stuff, because pretty much I was doing desk-based job. So actually, if you look back, so I give an example. In our day job, we do lots of survey planning. So it's not all about technical. You are talking to a survey contractor, finding the site based on various other drivers that affect your site's location selection. So without knowing, actually, you do other type of management as well. So people always think nobody is giving you a management role on the starting day of your career. And B is your employer is not going to assign you tasks to make sure you fulfill all 14 competencies. So I wouldn't see a realistic chance anyone go through all 14 and have equal competence. The good thing with CIWEM is what CIWEM is looking for. You are a competent professional. You have a system thinker, basically. You have a certain organized way of thinking. You know the problem. You have clear idea of the solution. So to develop this worldview, if I say so, I think the best way is to speak to people who already have done it. It makes a lot of difference. I go back to that thing that why you do chartership is one of the things. I left it quite late. One of the things that hurts if you don't have it. People say, why didn't you do chartership? And nobody's give you a sort of big job offer or anything if you have charter the next day. But what it makes difference is your confidence. Like you look back and say, well, why did I leave it so long? So my request to everyone is speak to someone in your organization, and he can see which you are failing to recognize. Going back to Hannah's comment, like when she sees with her mentee, she goes back to career overview and then, oh, you could do this, you could do that. And that helps. And that will relieve the mental block.
Great, thank you. And if I can just quickly pick up a relevant question from the audience. So for somebody who has a PhD and a few years of research-based work experience in environmental sciences, can they go for chartership? Is there anything in particular, any work experience that you would recommend, or does it come back to what we've just talked about? Do you think really it's a case-by-case basis that really they ought to be discussing with the sponsor directly? Alistair?
Can I kick up on that? Yeah. So PhD, I mean, Mo's a good one to ask here because he has a PhD, which is worth asking him about. But obviously PhD is a great period of experience. So it depends on how it was done over what time. I'm just reviewing somebody at the moment, actually, for his chartership, and he's got fantastic, his PhD was fantastic. So absolutely counted as all the experience he needed, really, plus a little bit more. I would just say, just be honest with yourself when you look at it. How did you do the PhD, and what experience have you had since then? Look at those 14 competencies, particularly the B and C competencies. How are you fulfilling those requirements now? And do you think you'll be able to offer enough evidence? By and large, you should have a cadre of about, as I said, the minimum of 3 projects that you can offer and talk around. If you've got those, then why not be ready to go for it now? But just take an honest overview of where you are in your career, and maybe your sponsor or mentor will help you do that as well, just a reality check, so that you know that you're ready to apply.
Great, thank you. Anything to add to that, Hannah or Mo?
I would say, like, of course, because you have done a PhD, you must have spent quite intense time in very specific technical issues. Your challenge is to make it sort of, if I say level to the wider audience, to scale it down from technicality. And your PhD project must have been driven by some real need. Mine was bathing water quality. This is a direct response for European Union's bathing water quality legislation. So your supervisor got the funding driven by triggered by something. So you see the wider prospect. So just take it yourself aback and then see the bigger context. I think this is the challenge if you are doing a PhD, because you are so used to talking and discussing the nth degree detail about one specific field of technicality. If you can do it, that's for me good enough a qualification that you are able to communicate in different level.
Yes, very good point.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to a slightly different topic then. And this is a question that actually gets asked quite a lot, especially from people early on in the process. Do you think there is such a thing as a minimum amount of experience in terms of years or in terms of level of seniority that is required to provide sufficient evidence against all of the competencies?
I think
Hannah?
Yeah, I think the guidance has changed. It used to, when I applied, it used to set out a certain amount of experience you had to have to apply for CEwem and then for other additional registrations, which actually drove me to, at the time, to only apply for CEwem because I wanted to do it. I wanted to crack on for it, and I didn't want to wait a further 2 years. I haven't got a master's. And I think the guidance is now more flexible to recognise those kind of situations where someone has a variety of different work experience, and it's not all about years of experience. There may be somebody that's come to the water and environment industry that has come to it as a career changer, that has 5, 10, 20 years experience in another sector, and there will potentially be relevant elements of what they've done previously that they can pull in, as well as, I would assume, the further academic study they've done to move over into the flood and water industry. So I think there's no hard and fast rules about it. I think realistically, if somebody is a sort of fresh graduate out of university, it's going to take them around 5 years to be able to have enough experience working on a variety of different things to build up their experience to meet those competencies. I'd say 2 things really. Keep a career log, keep a log, say every couple of months, write down what you've been doing, build up your understanding of the CIWEM competencies and start to understand where what you've been doing maps to those competencies, and take the opportunity through the appraisal process setting that every organisation will have, and that sort of development planning process, to understand where your weaknesses are. Find an ally who could be your future CIWEM mentor and help to understand where that is. So when you have those conversations with your line manager at those appraisals and development plan meetings, you can say, well, actually, I'd really like to do something that would get me experience in competency B4, whichever competency that might be, because then that manager can try and help find opportunities for you to do that work. The other thing I would say is that I'm a big fan of competency E2, which is the one around commitment to CIWEM. And my opinion on that as a mentor is that you need to do something that is more than just attending meetings. You need to do something that really contributes towards the work that CIWEM does. And that might not necessarily be through joining a committee. It might be through furthering CIWEM STEM work, for example. There's lots of opportunities to do that. But that's an opportunity that can be self-led, because a lot of that stuff is done in your own time anyway. So look for those opportunities to join committees. Think about whether there's an interesting project you've worked on that you could approach your local branch or new members group and say, hey, can I do a presentation on this? So sort of map out what I'm saying is map out where you're up to now, understand where you need to get to, and then think about those gaps you need to fill to understand when you're likely to be ready to apply.
Okay, thank you. Move on to a different question, unless Alistair or Mo, you have any pressing points to add to that?
Yeah, no, thanks.
Okay. So I've got one question here that I'd like to address as well. So I'll read this out verbatim. When I submitted towards the end of 2019, I was told I'd not achieved requirements for quite a few of the competencies, despite my 2 sponsors feeling confident in my submission. is there a way to get someone more heavily involved or more closely related to the review process to check over what I've done to avoid that happening again? Alistair, do you know of of a good way to do that?
The easiest way, I'm sorry to do a sales pitch, the easiest way would be to do the fast track to chartership course, because you've got three, we're all fellows of the institution, and we're all, we've all done hundreds of reviews, so we're all able to, and the feedback we're getting from that course is absolutely fantastic, because you are getting direct help from people that see it and do it every day. To be honest, if you wanted to, you could perhaps approach the branch and one of us might have a look for you. I don't know when I'm speaking. I'm actually quite happy to do that. If somebody wanted me to give them a quick look over it, I'd be more than happy to do that through the branch. That's what we're here to do. So, but we're not allowed as an institution, because of GDPR issues, to actually give out contact details for people. So you have to kind of find the links yourself. And the best way actually is, if you're in the area, because you may not be West Midlands branch, of course, but or your local branch, wherever that is, approach your local branch. And I'm sure the chair or whoever will be more than happy to help you match up with somebody that can give you that kind of advice. One thing I would say, by the way, is if you have applied before and you were turned back, you should have had some guidance as to what you were missing on the competencies that you weren't fully experienced on. And I put a lot of effort in when on those occasions when I have to fail somebody, I put a lot of effort into saying why. So hopefully you had a letter that did do that. If not, as I said, come and talk to us at the branches.
Thanks, Alistair. I do have one question, and I'm going to direct this at Mo, actually. So, Alistair, you said earlier that the CEng, CEnv, and CSci are really only needed if you require them for your role. So, what's your recommendation for applicants who maybe aren't sure whether they should be going for those or not, because maybe they don't know where their career is headed?
Start with, as Alistair said, you need to understand why you are doing it, first of all. And the most basic one is CIWEM, and most all-rounded one, I suppose, because it covers anything to do with environment, water. So make sure you get the CIWEM done first. All this company are ready for that. And I have helped one gentleman out who did his chartership for CIWEM but couldn't do chartered engineership. So he went for again. But he is in a engineering-based career, so he deemed that he need to be chartered engineer title. So it's very much individual related. Unless you really need it, you are passionate about getting it, you need to identify your need, I suppose. But do the basics first, get the CIWEM thing, competence, and get ready, and that will give you a good footing. But it's not as difficult, because I have done all four. I had to do about 56 odd competencies. Basically, it's a matter of sort of, if you look from a high level, it's not very difficult. So if you like, rather than taking as an exam and test, that sort of challenge, you are already doing many things, just to being able to recognize that, look, this is the case. Enjoy the journey. The spontaneously you'll get the answer. Basically, that's, I would say, rather than taking it as challenge for sort of is a preset objective that I'll have to have this. Then it becomes quite daunting.
Yeah. Okay. Do either of you?
Couple of things I might just chip into that. So absolutely, Mo, spot on that. I think, as I said right at the beginning, chartership is chartership. If your company needs you to be chartered water environmental manager is fine. So don't start fretting about those other roles. Sometimes we find people that are shoehorned into roles. It's quite common in consultancies where the only grade they've got is an engineer grade for some reason, and so you end up with somebody in an engineer grade that clearly isn't an engineer. Now that can be a challenge, because actually when you'll find they're in an engineering grade, but their role doesn't even require them to be an engineer. So there's nothing wrong with not having the chartered engineer. As long as you are chartered, it's fine. The only time you want a chartered engineer is if you're an organisation that specifically requires that, partly maybe for its clients, or maybe because of the people that role is responsible for, if there's a particularly strong engineering content. And you can apply later. So you can apply for your CIWEM now, and you can come back. I've just done about 25 reviews for CIWEM via Zoom, which has been very successful. And we had at least 3 or 4 of those were just applying for Chartered Engineer. They were already CWEM, and it's much better because they got more experience. So they were all pretty good, successful candidates. So you can apply later for the other registrations.
Thank you. Okay, got one question here about answering the competencies. So the competencies guidance says about I meant to say 100 words.
No.
I'm trying to interpret that question. Could you advise about balancing, I guess, the number of examples versus the depth and quality of the examples that you use against the competencies?
Can I lead on that one? Because that's a key part of the depth. The first thing I would say is join us next week and the following week, because then you're going to hear about that in more detail. So without wasting a lot of time now on that, please do join us next week and we'll explain it in more detail. But broadly, for each set of competencies, CEng, CEnv, you've got 4,000 words for each set to play with. So for CIWEM, you've got 14 competencies to spread out over 4,000 words. So that's roughly about 286 words per competence. It doesn't work like that, in my experience. For the A competencies, you need to be between 300 and 400 words. The B competencies, you want to be around 350 to 450. The C competencies, you want to be about, again, 300 to 400. And the D competencies can be between 200 and 300. And the E competencies as well. And I think you'll find, don't try and do the maths on that, but it gives you a guide of how much content there should be. And you should be offering at least a minimum of 1 example and no more than, I would actually say, this is what I believe, no more than 2 examples in each competence. Don't try and get yourself tied up in knots writing thousands. Lead with 1 example and supplement it with another. And that's the efficient way to use your word count.
Thanks. And sorry, as you say, Alistair, that'll be covered in more detail in the coming parts in this series. There is a specific question about perhaps what some people view as the strangest out of all the competencies, which is the ability to communicate in English. And I guess the guidance on that is the same, isn't it? That, common sense.
I addressed that in the opening, if you recall. I said it's a misnomer, the English, because it's an English chartership. It's actually about your ability to communicate. So we want to know examples of how you chair meetings, how you write a board paper. They can't read more than 5 words. I didn't mean that as any directors listening. So board papers have to be short and punchy. Stakeholder reports usually need to be very long because stakeholders like to know all the detail. Boards don't have time. So you have to pitch differently. Your ability to give presentations. That's what you do.
Even interpreting a drawing to your workmen, you need certain level of communication.
That's right.
How do you adjust your message, basically, depending on the audience?
Thank you. Have you got any advice on starting the process of filling in the application? So I think, Hannah, you touched earlier on just jotting down some bullet points against the individual competencies, but are there any templates, any tools that are available for that you know of?
Again, do you want me to start on that one? Because if the others don't mind, sorry to hog it all. If you think you're ready to apply and go online, and if you're happy to pay the money to register, it's all done online. It's a CRM system, so once you've registered, you've got your membership number, you can then start to populate it over time, save it, you can come back to it weeks, months later, and the membership team will be happy to guide you on that one. In terms of formats, the career overview report, I think, is best written as a separate document in Word. 1,000 words, you can control it, and then you can upload that as a PDF or as a Word document. Or if you want to, you can then copy and paste it into the box that's on the website. Not always that successful for some reason. Sometimes it has a 500 word limit and won't take any more. So my advice is to write your career overview report separately in Word or whatever document you like to use, and probably as a PDF and copied up as a PDF. PDF's the most successful way. And for your competencies, write them separately on paper so you can manage your word count. And then when you're happy with them and your sponsor's happy with them, then cut and paste them and load them up separately into the relevant boxes on the website. That's everything else is your CPD is usually just a PDF. Copy that up. Certainly at this stage, we would encourage you for your CPD to use the CIWEM format in future. And when you go on, when you've registered and you've gone into the CIWEM site, your own site, you'll see there's a fantastic CPD record format that you can use. I would absolutely recommend that you use that. It's really good, really organised. And all your certificates copied, and they need to be signed as true copies of the original, and then the PDF's loaded up. But we'll explain formats of the actual competencies in the next 2 sessions, and I've just explained how you should format your career overview report, and I believe you're going to get these slides, so you'll see that in black and white.
Yeah. Okay. And is there any considerations for? I see Mo has actually answered that question in the chat, but just for the benefit of everyone listening as well, are there any considerations for someone who's got work experience or study that was done abroad, or is it all the same?
All counts. Even if you've been on maternity leave and you've done some, actually I've just seen one of these candidates and she did some reading and stuff during while she's on maternity leave. It's fantastic. So that counts as CPD. If you've been abroad, we want to know about it. It's really exciting. If you work for a special interest, if you work for instance, like a local wildlife trust as a volunteer, if you're a governor of a school, we want to know about it. If you've been, I was a chair of governors for a long time, and I was a key part of creating the outdoor space for that curricula. The extracurricular learning, that all counts.
I think if the questioner means that the professional experience abroad, definitely it will count, because you need the same set of skill to do any job wherever you are. Only thing difference is that country to country regulation and legislation differs a bit, but the basic skill remains the same.
Can I add to that? That of those 25 candidates I just reviewed, at least half of them were overseas. So a lot of them in China, Hong Kong, Middle East. So, you know, we are an international qualification. So any experience around the world, as Mo says, it's all relevant. It's the same environment. Well, it's not exactly the same, but it's the same issues.
Okay, great. And then we've got one more question, which we might make the final one, which is around CPD. So what do you think qualifies, so to speak, as CPD? Are there key criteria that an activity needs to meet to count as CPD towards CIWEM?
I think the people, if I go and then I'll fill in any gaps, I think the key thing is understand CIWEM's guidance about what counts as CPD, because a lot more will count for CPD than you might originally think, and understand what you're trying to get out of that CPD. So it ties back to that the company I work for, annual element of understanding what goals you want to get to, planning your development, the appraisal process, so that you're being really clear. And CIWEM's online template for CPD guides you through this. You know, what are you trying to get out of something? What did you learn, etc. And keep an eye on that. Also try and I should take this advice myself, really. Try and keep it as up to date as possible. I tend to go through mine, and I keep it up to date online now on the My CIWEM area, but I found I tend to sort of find myself updating it after 3 months. Try and keep on top of it as much as you can, because I mean, it was my fellowship I applied for more recently than my chartership. What took me the longest was getting all my CPD together. I'd got records of it, but I kept it all in different places. So if you can keep on top of it, it will save you time later down the line.
Yeah. And any other points on that?
Yeah, I think I have touched on this. CPD is a lot broader than you think it is. The first thing is you don't have to have a CPD tick on your. That's just a company that set itself up to give CPD. There is no rules. There is no standard. CPD is common sense, really. It's when you have undertaken some learning that has really contributed to your professional development. You're a professional, we trust you, so you just tell us what it is. Admittedly, if you write it down and we think that's a bit weak, then we might sort of frown a little bit. But what I've been trying to train on the fast track course has been just to frame your CPD around the 5 competency areas, because actually then it's quite good. Then it's focused. So the A competency is about broad thinking. So CPD, that's learning, reading, really understanding the wider affairs. The B competency is about doing your job. So anything where you've had to read new new material to understand how you're going to deliver a task, any training you've given to your staff, or even presenting to the board when you've had to put a lot of effort into writing a paper. The C competencies, health and safety, obviously, any sustainability training. The D competencies, communication, chairing meetings. When you chair, by and large, you chair a meeting, you have to write the agenda, you have to think about what you want to do, and you have to think about what the outcomes are going to be. That's all CPD, because nearly every meeting you'll learn something new. I'm 60 now, and I learn something every day. It's amazing. I'm just gobsmacked at the stuff I don't know, and I just soak it all up and get it down, put it down on your CPD. And you may have more than 30 hours. If you're lucky enough to acquire CPD over many more hours, write it down. It doesn't matter. It's important. Most importantly, though, is it isn't about going to conferences, and it's not about going to CIWEM meetings. They are part of it, but there's loads more to CPD that you can claim without having to worry about whether you're acquiring it or not.
Right. Thank you. And we're coming very close to the end now. So one last question that I'll pose to the panel is, do you have any other key pieces of advice that you want to share with the attendees now?
Do you want to go first, or shall I chip in?
Feel free.
I think Mo said it most succinctly right at the start, is just start. Just get something written down, you know. For me, the career overview report is a good place to start, but actually some people might find that daunting. Maybe start with your CPD, look through your CPD and think, oh yeah, I can see where my career is going now, and then just write something down. The CIWEM format is great. We've got 14 competencies. You could start at any one of those if you wanted to. The career overview report is there. Just take a look back at your qualifications to remind yourself how you got to where you got. That might be enough to start you off. And obviously conversations with your employer or the community that you work in to inspire you to be chartered. Chartered is the gold standard. It's showing that you are independent, that you can operate and represent the profession. It gives confidence to you as a professional. It gives confidence to your client that you're going to act on their behalf well, and it gives confidence to your customers that you're giving them the best advice. There isn't anything better than being chartered as a professional. So just start.
Yeah, I would very much echo that, because once you've made that little chink into it, you'll suddenly find it seems a lot more accessible than you think it is, and you'll soon find you're rolling away, you're planning when you're going to submit, finding your sponsors, and and within a year or two you're there. So very much make a start today.
That's the best advice.
That's what I would say. Like, one good thing with Chartership, you work with people, they know you personally. Here you have been looked at by independent people who you are not related anyway. So you are acceptable to them, who are professionals, fellow professionals, recognizing your peers there. A. B is CPD is not a exercise. We all love to improve. And CPD is a process of improvement. I tell you one thing. Recently, I've been seeing some webinars in Netherlands and USA. They are doing some research from sewage water. They're trying to predict COVID risk in certain catchment. So we all find something that sort of make us enthusiastic. So I am very keen to sort of research into that. So this constitutes CPD. And CIWEM website gave you guidance how to record that. Your own studies can be a CPD. By the way, Stefan, good news for you. You got hit some good CPD, Alistair just mentioned, by chairing this. So
that's true.
Yeah. I'll have to write that down. Yeah, okay, great, thank you. That's a full hour, so we'll draw to a close there. Thank you very much to the three panelists. Now, to anyone listening, the next one in the series is 2 weeks from today. So that's the 19th of August. We'd really love to see you there again. If you've got any questions in the meantime, as you can see in the chat, you can submit those to membership@ciwem.org. And if you want to share this presentation, this particular talk, after the fact or rewatch it, you can find it on the CIWEM website or on the CIWEM YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, look for CIWEM, and you can't miss it. So thank you. Thank you for everyone listening and submitting questions as well. And hopefully see you again in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan.
Yeah, everybody. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Take care.